We've covered everything from historical fiction to vampire horror. Now it's time for a bit of a laugh at our own expense. The topic of the day is cultural satire. Hi, I'm Justine and this is Bookends. Today I want to chat with Ed Riche about his new book, Easy to Like. The novel is about a Canadian turned C-list Hollywood screenwriter who bluffs his way to the top of the CBC. Ed not only makes fun of the inner workings of the Mother Core and Toronto, but being Canadian itself. We're also at Ben McNally's today to get a couple of other recommendations. Let's go on in. I'm with Ed Riche, author of Easy to Like. So Ed, thanks so much for meeting up with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So in this book, you make fun of Canadians as a Canadian yourself.
Well, I'm a colonized. I've been colonized by Canadians, you know. Like, I don't really think of myself first as a Canadian.
You're from Newfoundland.
I'm from Newfoundland, and, you know, we've only been part of Canada since 1949, which is not that long.
Yeah.
So we're still sort of getting used to it.
Now, I don't know if you would agree with this, but the way that I've always seen it is that Canadians make fun of themselves a lot more than, say, Americans make fun of themselves.
Do you think?
I
think it's changing a little bit.
You think so?
I do. I think Canadians are becoming a little more precious. I think the country's getting a little more conservative, and a lot more conservative. And I think we're becoming less capable of laughing at ourselves. Another thing I've observed about Canadians and them laughing is they get very uncomfortable if they think there's a joke and they're not getting it. They really, really get very frosty, you know? What's all the funny business? Right? What's so funny, kids?
Now, you describe Canadians as both self-satisfied and self-doubtful. How do you think you can be both?
Well, they are. I mean, I don't think I'm going to say that's an absolutely true statement. We're very self-congratulatory. Watch us win hockey at the Olympics, right? We're just, you know, it's our game. We're the greatest. And now you see it, you start to see it in, well, just yesterday, that flyover for the Libya mission was very self-congratulatory. And yet we're all, those same people are so desperate for approbation from the United States and so on. They love us, they really do, they think we're great. So there's this insecurity, there's a national insecurity, and also this sort of new Canadian triumphalism. We used to actually be, I think, celebrate better things. It was like, look at our healthcare system, how humane it is. In literature, we were quite happy that we had international stars in letters. That's changing now. Now we're celebrating different things.
You are from Newfoundland.
Yes.
Why did you decide to base the book then in Toronto?
Well, Toronto is unfortunately the center of some universes.
Yeah.
And it's certainly the center of the Canadian media universe, which is a theme of the book. And I've had to come here a lot because I work in film and television as well as writing books and so on. So I've come here many, many times over the years for what we used to call the $500 cup of coffee. You know, to stay current with the people you work for, you meet them and so on, and fly in and fly out. So I've spent a lot of time coming in and out of Toronto. I've watched it change. I think I can watch it change a little more sometimes than people who live here because they can't see it because it's so gradual, and I see it in increments. And there's fascinating things about the place. For all the dissing it gets from the rest of Canada, I found it a really compelling location for the book.
Why do you think Canadians hate Toronto so much?
Well, because the people in Toronto never stop to think, they don't distinguish Toronto from the rest of the country. So they'll talk about things that are exclusive to Toronto as if all of us, and I can't think of an example right now, as if all of us would be interested. Furthermore, I mean, there are actual, I think, genuine political reasons for us to really, that are justified for us to loathe and despise Toronto. Say, if I put money in an RRSP, it's basically a federally government design plan to send money to Bay Street, right, where it'll be put in Canadian equity markets and so on. And that's a bit of a fix. All kinds of national institutions are headquartered here. So, you know, the bosses are all here, naturally, right? And the head offices are here phoning down telling us that we're doing something wrong.
Now, when you're writing satire, do you think it's easier to write good satire as an insider or as an outsider?
Well, you have to be both. You had to have been inside something,
Yeah.
a relationship, like a love relationship, work at the CBC or whatever, and then you had to be outside of it looking back. That's the way you can get the...
How do you do that then? If you've already been an insider, how do you take yourself out of it to be able to write that satire that's, like that good satire?
Well, I think it's not that you've left, it's from things you've been driven from. Part of satire is always going to be settling scores, right? If you're going to be like, critical analysis is going to be looking back at something that's been and finding faults with it and making them seem funny, seeing the absurdities that you were party to.
Yep.
And like I say, it doesn't have to be an institution like the CBC, or it could have been a marriage, it could be, anything. It could be the time you were at school, lots of things.
Main theme in the book is the CBC. Why did you decide, one of the main satirical themes in the book is the CBC. Why the CBC?
I worked there off and on over the years as a freelancer. I was never a staff member, and it's the large institution with which I'm most familiar. I'd hope with the book that it doesn't just, obviously people who have something to do with the CBC are going to, like yourself, you said you found it very familiar and funny, but I think anybody who works in a large institution and has a corporate culture that's that big, that it's the same thing.
Yeah.
There's going to be levels of nonsensical management in any large institution that are absurd when you look back at them. The sort of management gobbledygook that's in the book comes from the fictional managers of the CBC in the book. They could be at any institution. They could be at the Art Gallery of Ontario. They could be at the Royal Bank. They could be, the vice principal of a school. So anybody who works in an office, a large office, I think will find something they can attach. So they can find humor in this book that's familiar to them.
You find fault in the book, or you talk a lot in the book about the rating system in Canada, in broadcasting in general. Quality versus ratings.
Right.
Do you think that there could be a balance, though? I mean, it is business, right?
The CBC shouldn't be a business. The government demands that they be a business, that they be in the television business and compete and sell ads. So they're totally conflicted.
Yeah.
They have mandate issues that say they're supposed to reflect Canada back to itself and bind the country together. They've got a nation-building mandate, and that's often completely at odds with the notion that they have to be a profitable or self-sustaining operation. So it's their masters in Ottawa that are creating this sort of cognitive dissonance inside the institution. I'm being critical of sort of senior management and stuff at the CBC, but I don't envy their job. If someone said, "Would you like to be the head of English television?" I would say, not a chance, because it's a no-win situation for them. They cannot win given the terms they have to operate under.
In the acknowledgements, you say that you had a lot of CBCers who sang to help you write this book. How much of what is actually in the book is based on truth?
Any of the management talk that's in there that seems really silly and foolish, that's verbatim. And that's the kind of singing I was getting. I mean, I was working at radio for a long time, so most of my canaries come from the radio side, and it's just people that are forwarding me circulars and memos they got from management, like said, "Can you believe this?" Send, right? Yeah. And so I just harvested stuff from a lot of the stuff that came from the top, and and just reused it in the book.
How important is that for satire to have truthfulness?
I think it's critical. Yeah. Yeah, I think it. What's odd is some of the what seem to be the most far-fetched things in the book are the ones that are true. Feral zebras in California. Some of the things that people say, the managers at the CBC say, they're all factual. And I guess it does give it a skeleton. I mean, it has to be. It can't be too. You're pushing things a little to make it satire, but it should have some foundation in reality, because you're being critical. It's critical analysis.
When you're writing a book like this, what's more important to you, satire or comedy?
Comedy. I think it's a pretty easy read. It's easy to like, and I think I'm good at it. And there's not a lot of. As a reader, I so often want comic diversion. And it doesn't have to be fluff. I want a substantial piece of literature that's comic and diverting and makes me laugh. And they're very rare. They're very hard books to find. It's 1 in 100, if that. Most books are dour and serious, and I take the craft of comedy quite seriously. You know, every now and then you'll get a review that sort of slights something that's slapstick in the book. And say, oh, and at moments even slapstick, and not thinking for a second that that's deliberate,
Right.
or never imagining how hard it is to write slapstick in a book. It's tough. You've really got to get your timing and your pacing very careful, because you know readers read at different speeds. They engage in literature different ways, and so you're never going to really know exactly how your reader's reading your words. But with comedy, timing and pace are central to its agency. So you have to write with, I think, a real degree of precision for people to roll and laugh with you the way you intend. You have to be very careful. And I don't think that skill is held in that high regard by critics and scholars and so on. It's harder than they think.
Part of satire, I think, is finding fault with things and making that satirical. Do you think that you sort of live life like that, or do you actually consciously take on that attitude when you're writing?
No, unfortunately, I live life that way. You know?
Yeah.
And I think pretty well everybody that's in the comedy business, satirical or otherwise, it comes from unhappiness and disappointment with things.
You just find a way to.
And that's how you're dealing with it. Rage and comedy are really close. And I think anybody that's in the comedy business is really, it's sublimating some kind of rage. Yeah. Sorry. My 14-year-old daughter says, "You've got anger issues, Dad." and I think I do.
You deal with them by writing.
I deal with them by writing, yeah.
Ed, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I have Ben McNally here with me to get a couple of other recommendations. Just to start off, what do you think makes satire good satire?
Oh, the fact that you can recognize yourself in it. Even the best satire, which either involves institutions or governments, you're not excluded from that, right? Each of us as individuals have tendencies to do things that we should feel funny about, rather than feel depressed about.
Do you think that there's any point where an author should draw the line?
Oh, I think authors know that, and I think sometimes people go over the line, but that's a lot more often stand-up comedy and things like that. I think authors, because there are so many filters involved, editors and publishers, and a lot of cases books get legaled, as we say in the business. If something looks a little bit tenuous, then it goes straight to the lawyers, where people who are standing up in front of an audience, sometimes they get themselves into trouble just because their momentum carries them along a little bit.
You have a couple of other recommendations. Let's start with this one. What is this one about?
Well, this is the second volume of Terry Follis's blistering satire on political life in Canada. The first volume, Best Laid Plans, won the Leacock Award, and this is volume 2, and it's quite amusing look at how elections work and how politicians work in Canada. Yeah, absolutely. And the other one is Evelyn Waugh's classic book, Scoop. And you would think that given what's going on in the news today, that newspapers in England would have cleaned up their act a little bit. This is Waugh's book, which took place, almost 100 years ago, and talks about, well, I guess almost 70 years ago, talks about how newspapers in England behaved in those days. And I think we're probably ripe for yet another satire of British newspaper practices. Yeah.
Ben, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
You can find information on these two books as well as Ed's book on our website, bookendstv.com.